Hello and welcome back to Just Good Game News, your weekly place for positive things in the gaming industry. Lord knows we kinda need them. Don't know what I'm doing with my head, but it's all on camera. Jay Leno. Honestly, a hell of a week when it comes to games. The amount of stuff that is out. I'm hoping to put together another grab bag. I did one last month when Hell Is Us and The Rogue Prince of Persia both dropped on the same day. And as I'm recording this, we are right in the middle of a ridiculous amount of good news and good games to play. Like Baby Steps is going to be out very soon. Hades 2 is out soon. Silent Hill F. There's the update for Mario Kart World that just dropped. There's an absolute ton of stuff to celebrate. Stellar Blade got some new missions and content as well. You can't move for great games, and you can't move for good news as well. First up then, the breaking Feelgoods. The breaking news that makes you feel good. This one made me feel very good. A new Mafia game leaking from voice actor Carina Conti. She voices Isabella Torrisi in Mafia the Old Country and was literally on a live stream with a YouTuber called BubblyNuggets. They were just having a conversation. Bubbly got in there and asked the question, hey, so what's happening with Hangar 13? Have they been, are they doing another Mafia game? And Conti just literally said yes. I always love when this happens because it always seems to come out. It was like the thing with Edward Kenway's voice actor in the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake a few weeks ago, where he was asked at a Comic-Con type place, hey, are you doing the remake? And he's like, yeah, you might have to go through Assassin's Creed Black Flag again. And then the lawyers get in touch and go, can you not reveal what's going on? And everything gets sewn up. So we're at that stage where a voice actor has revealed something and they probably weren't supposed to. But still, Conti says that Hangar 13 have secured the funding for the next Mafia game. They've been allowed to do it. And we are getting another Mafia game, which is awesome. Mafia the Old Country has sold over 1 million copies. I absolutely love that thing. I did a spoiler chat on the channel as well. You can go watch that in terms of the way the story wraps up. I think it's an awesome game though. Super solid third-person shooter with a fantastic story and phenomenal characters. Absolutely love Isabella herself as a character and Enzo that you play as well. So Mafia series going very strong, and we have another one coming. Next up, Hideo Kojima announcing various projects. Now we knew there's a whole thing with Kojima. He did a massive live stream. It was called Beyond the Strand, where he detailed various different things that he's involved in, from sake. He's got his own custom sake through to the different games that he's working on, like OD, which is the horror game that's going to be on Xbox. Pretty much PT Resurrected is what OD is, which is awesome. Game looks fantastic in terms of its motion capture and facial animation and everything else. However, one thing that's got everybody talking is Physint. This was already announced as a Sony exclusive. It's pretty much the next Metal Gear Solid. It's kind of why Sony bought Kojima Productions in the first place, to do the next Metal Gear. And then dude went off and just used his blank check to make Death Stranding instead, which, as you do. But it seems like they've finally circled back around, and Kojima announced Physint a few years ago, and we now have the first piece of key art for it. However, the character that's in the key art is obscured. Their face is kind of in shadow, leading a lot of people to speculate who the person could be. Kojima loves getting his big name actors in. Every single Kojima project right now has a handful of known actors attached to it, whether they be massive deals in Hollywood or just other major figures around the world. And a lot of people are pointing to Robert Pattinson for Physint. One, because the actual shape of the dude in the silhouette looks a hell of a lot like him. And also because if you go back to May this year, when the Cannes Film Festival was on, Hideo Kojima was spotted talking to Robert Pattinson, and they took a picture together. And then later on, Pattinson was asked, hey, what did you guys talk about? And Pattinson joked that he couldn't reveal anything yet. And so, it makes sense. If you want to get someone who is that perfect mix of sort of youthful energy, has that wider appeal, has a lot of charm to him, like Robert Pattinson, but coming off the Batman is totally able to do grit and more serious, tonalities. Getting the Batman actor in, who can also kind of walk that line, I think that would be a great fit. Before I go any further, I'm going to have to plug some stuff over on the patreon.com/Tailford. You can get access to the Just Good Game Show early, ad-free, on a special RSS feed. I've reduced the tiers down, so now we have the Helping Hand donation tier at £3 a month. You can get early access, like I said, to the Just Good Game Show for £5 a month, as well as a Patreon-exclusive podcast called The Man Who Stares at Goats, which is just an excuse to revisit the greatest games of all time. Every single month, you can play along, you can submit your own talking points and questions, etc. around those games, and we just celebrate something every single month. But if you would like the full version of the Just Good Game experience, that is the Just Good Game same show, as the news itself is taken from that show. You can access the whole thing, like I said, over on Patreon, over on your podcast feed of choice. Next up, Nintendo have fixed Mario Kart World after a ton of feedback and pressure from the fans in general. Anybody who's played Mario Kart World feels like, it has that feeling that the game is so full of promise. The open world mode was, I would say, missold in terms of the thing that game was hung on. And now Nintendo have got out there and done a massive patch addressing the vast majority of the complaints that people had. One of which was the detail in the open world, as in, that open world map is filled with P-switch challenges, different things that you can trigger and then do different stun courses, things like that. But they weren't tracked. There was no way to track what you'd done before or after, no way to see which P-switches you had done before, and no way to see which collectibles you'd found as well in regards to the Peach medallions. One major update for the game adds that stuff in, so although you can't ping the radar and see which P-switches you're yet to do, you can actually finally, and it's such a basic feature, track what you've completed before. So you can go quadrant to quadrant and finally actually hoover up an open world Mario Kart experience, which I would say is what they advertised in the first place. There are a ton of details to this patch overall, so I'd recommend you go check out the full thing. However, another major one is that they have increased the frequency of 3-lap races online. Now, again, that'll sound like the most obvious thing in the world to a lot of people who haven't maybe played Mario Kart World yet. But another one of the big selling points for World was these tracks that were ostensibly giant roads from one location to the next and didn't loop around, like a racing track. It was only a handful of tracks that did that, or the last lap in a major race that would then become, like the final lap of the race would then loop in on itself to give you something more traditional in terms of a Mario Kart experience. Nintendo have increased the frequency of standard lap races, which is awesome. Like, to a degree, that's what people want. It's still not a selectable mode from the menu, so you're still, hoping that you get the right thing online, but it is a step in the right direction, and this is one of the only times, at least off the top of my head, that I feel like Nintendo has actually capitulated and listened to fan feedback and then overhauled one of their games. Next up, something that I kind of love, but the reception to it online has been a little bit mixed, so your mileage may vary. Sony's new rewards program. Now, to me, this feels like their replacement for the PlayStation Stars reward program, which was wrapped up back in July, at least in terms of being able to earn, the whole thing with PlayStation Stars is that you would play different video games, and if you'd signed up to the PlayStation Stars program inside the PlayStation app, then they would give you different goals. So it was like, okay, boot up a PlayStation Classic game, or, try and do a certain amount of goals, certain amount of whatever, like kill a certain amount of enemies in a game, whatever it was. Then they would give you coins, and you could use those coins to redeem against in-store vouchers, or you could use them to redeem against certain game deals that were available through the app as well. It was a really cool idea, and it was very much like Nintendo's reward scheme as well. That was wound down back in July this year in terms of being able to earn new coins, but they're not actually taking the whole thing offline until November 2026. So if you've built up all the coins from previously and before the thing shut down, you have until next November to redeem them. You can trade them for £5 vouchers, £10 vouchers for the PlayStation Store if you have enough coins, or you can trade them for specific games that are listed as well. It's a massive shame that that's gone away. Like, that's the thing that should have remained the gold standard. They should have just pushed that a lot more. If you look into the making of PlayStation Stars, it apparently started as an NFT program, because of course it did. Tim Ryan was at the head of Sony back then, Mr. Money Grubber himself. So apparently they wanted to have this paid-for NFT store that turned into this freebie version, because NFTs obviously were not received very well, and so they had to kind of rework the thing. Anyway, the breaking news is that PlayStation has announced this new reward scheme where you will have access to specific bits of merchandise and collectibles in the real world from the PlayStation Store if you've managed to achieve a specific thing in-game. The thing that they're leading with is called Ghost Rewards. They said it'll change for different games, but the one that they're putting out straight away is Ghost Rewards, tying into Ghost of Tsushima. And specifically, it ties into two trophies from that game. If you've done 100% of the game, you've got all the trophies, and you have the Platinum, you'll be able to connect your PlayStation account to the PlayStation Store and then have access to a specific pin badge that you can unlock to prove, in the real world, what you were able to achieve in the game. There's also a trophy tied to a specific story point in that game, and if you've managed to get that, then you have access to a specific t-shirt that you can buy as well, that has a specific graphic on it. I like the idea of this stuff. It's not going to be for everybody, and it is one of those things where I've seen the immediate backlash saying, well, why the hell are we paying for the thing that we then have to go and buy if we've put the time in to beat the game in the first place? I get that argument. I just personally never believe that a company is going to give you an item for free in the physical world. So they might give you a digital collectible, but they're not going to give you a free t-shirt, at least if you're not at like a conference preference or something. And so I never expected this to result in freebies in terms of, like, you know, allaying the actual cost of the t-shirts or the pin badges. Where you might recoil in fear is the price itself. We only have American prices for these, but the pin badge is $25 and the t-shirt is $25. Now that comes after you've achieved the thing in the game itself. Again, I like the concept of beating games, hitting certain trophy points in a game, and then being able to get exclusive stuff in the real world. I just like that idea. And Nintendo still has a version of that in terms of their rewards program. It's just not as lucrative as it used to be. They used to give you like 10% of the game's cost. They would then give you in gold coins. You could then add that stuff up. It's not that anymore. But on the Nintendo side, they still do maintain that you can have, you can use your silver coins, I think is what it is, to be able to get like tote bags and badges and stickers and stuff like that. So that idea of in-game completion resulting in physical rewards, I like that. And I'm throwing this in as more of a talking point, I guess. But I still think it's a cool thing to hopefully build on. You know, if the general response is, oh my God, Sony, this costs way too much, then I'm sure they'll amend it going forward, because there's too much of a cool idea here to not capitalize on overall. Lastly, more Metal Gear Solid remakes are coming. This comes from ex-IGN journalist Destin Leggeri, sitting down with a couple of Konami producers, as Konami themselves have put out an official poll asking fans which game they would like remade next. So they are very much committing to, you know, where the hell do we go from here? I always thought it was really weird doing Snake Eater first, but I guess timeline-wise it makes sense to do that first if you're reapproaching the entire franchise. And it's worth throwing up that, you know, they literally just say, in terms of this official Metal Gear production hotline questionnaire, it comes from Tokyo Game Show in 2025 as well, with them saying, you know, which game would you like remade next? And they list the original Metal Gear and then Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. Those are the 2D ones. Then you've got Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, 4 Guns of the Patriots, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, and Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. Now, I don't think you need to touch, well, to be honest, that's a fascinating thing. I was going to say maybe you don't need to touch Phantom Pain because it still plays phenomenally. If they get the permission or whatever the hell they need to do to go into the guts of Phantom Pain and actually add in that game's final cutscene. There was a whole thing, if you might not already know, the general fallout between Hideo Kojima, obviously, you know, lead mastermind behind Metal Gear Solid back in the day, when he was still at Konami. He, at some point when they were trying to ship Phantom Pain, that game's final cutscene that actually makes the story make sense was left on the cutting room floor and then put out on this separate bonus disc that only came with certain versions of Phantom Pain. And the cutscene itself has obviously since been uploaded to YouTube, so you can get the full story these days, but you've still got to go looking for it. Whereas Phantom Pain itself just kind of ends. There's a whole Act 2 announcement, and then it kind of just regurgitates a lot of the same missions. That game feels like it went through development hell. We've never really had the full story of it. But my point is, if you're going to go back and reapproach something like an MGS5, the gameplay is absolutely solid, but you might as well stitch together the disparate parts of that game's story in terms of the way the second half of it comes together to give new gamers or returning gamers a much more satisfying product. That idea of revisiting the original 2D games as well, that's fascinating. That would require obviously so much more work, and I would say probably some script changes as well. You know, you have bosses in the original Metal Gear called Shoot Gunner. Or maybe you keep Shoot Gunner, to be honest. I still feel like you know, Kojima's writing style would only get more over the top and would only get more philosophical and in detail the more he fleshed out the franchise, and the more he's fleshed out other works as well, obviously like Death Stranding. But still, Konami committing to more Metal Gears is fascinating, and it's specifically because Delta sold, like, I think it's 1.4 or 1.2 million copies in its first few days. So that's always going to get the money men to take notice. And Metal Gear was always a big money franchise. And so, you know, going forward, if you're a Metal Gear fan, Kojima fan, Metal Gear fan in general, you have Physint coming from Hideo Kojima, the next, you know, whatever the hell the next spiritual successor to Metal Gear Solid is. And you have all the reapproaches to Metal Gear from Konami, hopefully with their heart in the right place. If Delta is anything to go off, then they massively know what they're doing. Like getting in touch with the original voice actors to commit new lines to the project, getting in touch with the original swimsuit models that were on that game's in-game posters to take new photos as they've gotten older. That's awesome. Like, things like that prove that the development team over at Virtuous were given enough time and money from Konami to do it right. Next up, the Game Spotlight. and I'm spotlighting Wonder Stars. It was shouted out by Shaka Vitaku last week in the YouTube comments, and I have a video for this on the YouTube channel as well, where I just sat down, hit record, and just dove into it because I like the look of the teaser trailer for this so much. I hadn't even heard of Wonder Stars until last week, but after Shaka Vitaku mentioned it, I looked at the trailer, and I'm a big anime guy. I've literally got a Demon Slayer poster in the corner of this room, and watching this, I was like, good lord, the amount that they have invested in recreating the very specific 90s anime vibe. The game itself is channeling a ton of the original Dragon Ball Z, if not the original Dragon Ball anime overall. You even have options in the menus to make the audio sound worse, make it sound more like it's from the 90s. It's called classic audio versus the modern, and that's a really cool way to go as well. But the thing that really grabbed me is the presentation, and it is a turn-based RPG. However, the way you're doing the combat is all based on stringing together different words to create different attacks, which is a really cool idea. I feel like we've hardly had that as a mechanic. It made me think of Baba Is You, which is a cool word-based puzzle game from a few years ago. And obviously there are other things like Typing of the Dead or whatever it is in terms of word-based gameplay. But in this, you are selecting a subject, you're selecting your attack type, whether it's a kick or a punch or a headbutt, or you're clawing someone with a different party member, and then you're adding on the elements or the different type of attack that you want to do, and you unlock words based on how you perform in combat. You can choose to honor different enemies as you beat them by giving them the peace symbol and just bowing to them rather than taking them out. That will get you more honor, that will also get you more words and more abilities that they suggest to you as well. And so you're building out this vocabulary as you go through the levels, which is to say that the world map itself and the progression through the game is almost node-based on the world map. You're going point to point to point and then engaging in a conversation, like a story beat. Maybe you're finding some treasure, maybe you're doing a fight, and you pick different paths through the open world, through the map. As you go through, you can then go back onto those levels, replay them, pick different paths, unlock different things, and all around get stronger as you go, as you make it through. As I said, though, it's the presentation that is just exemplary. I do think, my only negative is that there's not voice acting for this, because there's so much of it that is channeling Dragon Ball. To the point, where you have, like, each level or whatever you call it is treated as an episode. It has an introductory title card. There are gorgeously animated anime cutscenes in between certain parts as well when it comes to the story. And all of that stuff feels like it would just benefit from the voice acting. And so, like I said, the production is exemplary overall. And I love all the animation, all the different abilities that you can do, all the different hit reactions from your character Ringo, or from the enemies that you're hitting. All of their attack animations, hit animations, just look incredible. This thing is so handcrafted and so exemplarily put together. I just need to shout it out. It is easily the most overlooked game of the year, because even something like Echoes of the End that I've mentioned in previous weeks, I still feel like that had a little bit of a circulation in terms of its teaser trailer or its follow-up gameplay trailers. Wonder Stars, I hadn't even heard of, and I largely, pride myself or whatever on trying to keep up with the industry as much as possible. So if you like what you see or what you hear, go check out Wonder Stars and see if it's the kind of thing you would like to get stuck into. I've only done about an hour and a half to 2 hours of it. You can see my entire first hour on the YouTube channel, and then I've done a little bit more since then. But yeah, man, just absolutely loving the vibes overall. On to the overlooked games of the week. They can be new, they can be old. Obviously, Wonder Stars I would have in here as well as a brand new game that is being massively overlooked. However, I wanted to elevate that to the game spotlight, which leaves the community suggestions for this. And we have one from Matt8622 recommending DMC Devil May Cry from 2013. Easily one of the most overlooked action games of all time, considering the landscape that game dropped in. I was absolutely part of the hate brigade back when the DMC reboot first dropped in 2013, mainly because I absolutely loved the original Dante look. Like, I absolutely love those original games. Even DMC 2 at the time, like, that game is complete trash, but I like the wall jumping, the backflips, like the look of Dante, so much that at the time when 2013 was announced, I was like, oh, I would take DMC 2 over this. But if you actually played Ninja Theory's Devil May Cry, back when they were just sort of given the IP from Capcom, there's so much to enjoy about it. The combat is the standout thing. Ninja Theory make incredible combat systems, and offsetting all these different weapon switches to specific shoulder buttons, I think, is a really cool way of extending combos and making you think differently in combat compared to the other Devil May Cries. It's very much a tone swap. I think that one thing that makes DMC Devil May Cry worth revisiting today, though, is knowing that Capcom got the reins back and then did Devil May Cry 5, because it then reframes the 2013 DMC as this kind of cool indie film one-off thing. It's almost like some big studio gave their IP to a smaller team and just said, do something cool, just do something fun on the side. We'll do the main games over here. You guys do something. And I think that approach, again, in retrospect, it wasn't the plan back in the day. It was meant to be that this was the direction for Devil May Cry. But looking back on it, if you play DMC now, you can enjoy the combat. You know, you have the enhanced edition, which plays way better than the original one did in terms of the frame rate, the resolution. It's just a stellar action game. And I think as much as at the time I hated the sort of aggro, shoegazy Dante that they gave us, I think he does work. Considering what they're trying to do with the character overall. And I like the stupid... I don't know, rebellion storyline they have going with Virgil as like the leader of a resistance movement. I think that's really fun. Yeah, overall presentation for DMC is thoroughly recommendable now. It definitely wasn't back in the day. Seapots David 3981 recommends Dragon's Dogma 2, another game that was dogged in itself back at launch for quite a few things. One being Capcom's over-monetization of in-game items. It wasn't something that was new to Dragon's Dogma, but for whatever reason, it blew up around that game, where you could, buy certain keys, certain unlocks, things that you would naturally get in the game if you just played it instead. It's ironic because I just mentioned Devil May Cry, but DMC was also something. DMC 5 was another game where you could just buy the red orbs to upgrade Dante or Nero in that game. It's very much become a Capcom practice, even though they don't get dragged for it overall. They did for Dragon's Dogma, though, and it's a shame because Dragon's Dogma 2 is easily one of the most recommendable modern RPGs in the last sort of 10 years or so. A really cool open-world RPG with great character customization and an awesome approach to combat and, mission design in itself. The coolest thing with this, I think, is the combat itself, like the fact that you do get to equip all these other pawns, all these side characters that you get, and it's fundamentally a single-player game. However, it carries over the mechanic from the first Dragon's Dogma, where you're putting, you're training these different pawn characters, which in world are just servants, ostensibly. They learn different fighting styles and they fight alongside you. You might train your pawn, and then you put them in this overworld dimension, and then other players can receive your pawn. They can go on quests with them while you're not gaming. And when you log back in, your pawn returns to you and says, "Hey, I've just been over there fighting a big old dragon, and I've got this item for you while you were away." And then you go on a quest in real time with your characters and you flesh them out that way. Dragon's Dogma 2 added a way more animations, combo stuff, tag team stuff in terms of the party members that you have, even though it's really only your main character has any real agency. Like I said, the pawns are fundamentally servants alongside you, but the game looks absolutely stunning. It's in the RE engine, which has become Capcom's flagship engine overall. And yeah, man, it's one of those titles where if you can't beat a boss or you can't beat an enemy, straight up, you can probably journey somewhere else. I remember Josh discovering this over on What Culture, realizing that he was trying to fight this big old dragon that you could see from a mile away, and he ended up leaving the battle, climbing up a turret, finding a crossbow, and just taking it out from across the map. And then walking back to the dragon and getting all the plunder and the mission goals and everything from that. Dragon's Dogma 2, low-key, one of the most recommendable RPGs of the last decade or so. The last community suggestion is J-Rock Art recommending Beautiful Joe. Oh, we got a Capcom sweep this week because Beautiful Joe is, and again, everything ties back to Devil May Cry. Dante is in the PS2 version of Beautiful Joe. But yeah, if you haven't played it, Beautiful Joe made huge waves back in the 2000s for being a hyper-stylish 2D side-scrolling brawler, ostensibly, with really cool slow-mo effects and a really cool presentation. Just something that I feel would be at home hugely on modern HDR displays. Like, get that thing on a Switch 2, get that thing on a PS5, and upscale all the textures and make it run even more buttery smooth than it once did. Why is Beautiful Joe not available today? But yeah, that thing was just so immediate. I remember the games press at the time freaking out about the way this game looked and the way that this game played, and getting my hands on it. I use the word immediate because it focuses on making you feel good. And I loved playing as Dante, this weird sort of chibi, inky version of Dante that you could get in Beautiful Joe. Just a super cool action game. And yeah, like a hyperly recommendable one as well. Next up, 3 game deals and 3 game deals, if you know what I'm saying, and some of you do, some of the people don't. Down in the comments, it's very much me being a pernickety Englishman. We have 3 game deals because there's 3 game deals, and then there's also 3 game deals. There's difference in the sentence. It's educated, man. Anyway, we have a Dragon Ball Kakarot on sale for £2.23 until the 8th of October. A ludicrously cheap price for a game that is that that massive. If you're a Dragon Ball fan, you're an anime fan, and you haven't played Kakarot, I would hugely recommend it. It has a really, really cool combat system, and the presentation is exemplary as well. If you're just channeling that look of the Dragon Ball saga, I feel like, and I mentioned this last week when Scarlet Nexus was on sale, which I think it might still be by the time you're watching this. But yeah, I feel like modern anime aesthetics have come such a long way. Like, it is one of those things where if you just want to play a game that looks like you're controlling the anime itself, DBZ Kakarot nails that. The Demon Slayer games totally nail that in the new Hinokami Chronicles titles. And so yeah, Kakarot retells the story of, it's ostensibly it's a Goku game. It's Path of Neo for Dragon Ball fans. You're following everything that Goku got up to, all the way from the original titles fighting Raditz, all the way through to the Super Tournament, whatever you call the tournament in Dragon Ball Super. And like I said, the combat is awesome. There's a lot of wider ancillary stuff in terms of stat grinding and equipables, different like loot items that you can put on your character. I never felt like there was any real pull towards that. You can equip that stuff. You can do more damage. More numbers can fly off the enemies while you're attacking them. For me, it was all about the presentation, the over-the-top energy beams, the energy beam clashes, and fighting all of these different characters and iconic enemies from the show with all of the voice acting intact. To me, it's the biggest love letter they've done to Dragon Ball history so far. And the fact that it's available for a few pounds is absolutely a steal. Also available until the 8th of October is Shadow of Mordor. Another game, it's a running theme this week of games that were lambasted at launch for good reason, only for developers to change things going forward. Middle-earth Shadow of War, you might remember from 2017, was absolutely hated for having orc loot boxes. And they tried to steer into it back then. There was an orc character that would rub his hands whenever you would spend real money at the vendor to buy an orc loot box. Just a thoroughly detested game because of that back then, even though developers Monolith are some of the most talented individuals in the industry and are so hampered by Warner Brothers at the top as their publisher, bolting them to different projects that then take forever to come out, like the Wonder Woman game that they've been strapped to for the last 8 years, or Shadow of War, where clearly Warner Brothers saw the money in regards to the way the loot box conversation was going across the middle to the end of the 2010s, and I have to assume got them to put loot boxes into what was formerly Shadow of Mordor, making Shadow of War this weird endless game initially, where you had to do all these endless battles, get all these different orcs to your side. Everything was randomized so that you were incentivized to put more money into the loot box side of things, and it meant the end game to that title could go on for tens if not hundreds of hours until you saw everything. All that stuff was gutted. I think it was 6 or 7 months after launch, going into 2018, because it always just got in the way anyway. Shadow of War is an incredible game. Like, the game side of it, the gameplay, the combat, the amount of different ways that you can customize your squads, and your enemies and everything as well. It's just a super cool idea. The Nemesis system, something that has yet to be expanded upon whatsoever. Warner Brothers own the patent, so no one else can get stuck in. And Shadow of War was the last time that we saw an advancement of what 2014's Shadow of Mordor first set in place. The Nemesis system itself is, say you're fighting a random NPC in the open world, you kill someone, you cut off their arm, you spike them through the eye, whatever it is. That enemy will then come back at a random point in time. Alongside that is a sort of chessboard of different enemies that you can see, different power hierarchies that you're affecting based on which enemies you've taken out. And sometimes it can be an NPC that comes back to fight you again. Sometimes it can be a more known character, like a captain orc or whatever, that, lost their power because you took them out, you cost them their position, they've then been replaced, something like that. Either way, as the game unfolds and the more that you play, all of that stuff becomes tailored and customized to your experience, and you start having an actual relationship, or an antagonistic relationship with a specific orc that formerly was a total nobody, but is now your main antagonist. And even to the point where you can like cut off part of their head and they come back with like a bolted on metal skull, being like, "Well, you thought I was dead, did ya?" And then you gotta go up against them again. So many cool, pure gameplay ideas that were buried under this horrific orc loot box thing that finally today you can just enjoy, and the game is available for less than £5. And it is 8 years later. But still, there's a totally recommendable game here, and a lot of people held off playing this title because of how much the negative press got to the reputation of the game itself, which is completely justified. This pretty much killed the Middle-earth series, the Middle-earth series of games. We had Shadow of Mordor, incredible game, 2014, 2017 Shadow of War, and then nothing else because of just how badly handled Warner Brothers, treat the IP. So treat yourself to Shadow of War, a drastically improved version of the game than what first released back in the day. day. And my last deal recommendation is a big old Final Fantasy sale over on Nintendo Switch. This seems to happen every few months. Mainly, I have to assume, because Final Fantasy Tactics, the remaster, is out at the end of this month, and maybe Square Enix just want to get a lot of positive buzz around the Final Fantasy brand again. But the Golden Trilogy of Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 are all down to between £5 and £6. Weirdly, the older games they're charging more for the older titles. If you go from Final Fantasy 3, 4, 5, or 6, they're like £9.30 something. They're closer to £10, which is really interesting. I would still massively recommend Final Fantasies, 4, 5, and 6. I was going to say especially 5, but that waxes and wanes. I love 4, and 5 in particular. However, if I'm shouting a specific one out, oh my god, I'm shouting a specific one out from that crop. Final Fantasy 7, of course. Because if you haven't played Final Fantasy 7, it's worth playing for a $5. You've always wondered, where you should start. Grab yourself one of the Golden Trilogy of 7, 8, or 9. You really can't go wrong. If you're brand new, I'd probably say 9 in terms of the storytelling. 7 is obviously iconic, one of the most famous games of all time. 8 is a bit of a mess in regards to its story, but it's absolutely gorgeous in terms of the presentation, the storyline, the music especially. You have composer Nobuo Uematsu firing on all cylinders across these titles. And yeah, man, they are very much worth snapping up if you haven't yet. Next up, some tips and tricks, and I'm going to throw in some stuff about Mario Kart World here, because I have to imagine a ton of people will be picking up the game or revisiting it now that all the changes have been made and the open world is actually enjoyable to move around. If you're new to Mario Kart World, one of the biggest things that's worth shouting out, and this is buried in the game's tutorials, if you go in the menus, go in the tutorials, you'll find this. But obviously Mario Kart and kart races in general are synonymous with drifting around corners. One thing that Mario Kart World brings in is being able to drift straight forward. If you just hold R as you're moving forward, not with the direction, not with left or right, you'll charge a static jump. You can then use that. You'll see like the wheels glow and stuff. You'll then do that as a way to jump onto the rails or jump onto the wall, different walls around the courses, so that you can wall ride and get around tracks in a whole other way. Once you get this mechanic down and you start getting a feel for the physics, you'll get around the levels and the courses a hell of a lot faster than you would if you were just going to stay on the ground. So master the straightforward jump, the rail grinds, the wall rides. That's the way to play Mario Kart World. And thankfully, because we're being served up more specific 3-lap courses, there'll be way more walls to ride on and way more rails to grind anyway. Another thing is that you should turn off smart steering. This is on by default. It's something else that I feel came out of the Mario Kart Wii era, where we started getting all those assist modes, which is fine. You've got a lot of newcomers to Mario Kart. But if you're anything of a seasoned gamer or anything of a driving game, if you've played a driving game before or a Mario Kart game before, you should turn off smart steering. It increases the handling in terms of the weight of your kart, the way that you go into drifts. I just find that it feels a hell of a lot better. And it's one of those things where I don't want that feeling when I'm going into a drift of the game taking over. I want to be able to get the feel for each kart. And Mario Kart's physics are perfect at this point. There is a massive distinction between playing as someone like a shy guy versus like a Bowser or a heavier character. And you'll feel that a lot more if you turn the smart steering off. Also, just a cool thing is the fact that the open world mode has a full day-night cycle. If you're spending more time in the open world, you might start to realize that there is the day-night cycle, and also all the NPCs have day-night cycles themselves. The overworld day-night cycle takes 24 minutes. Like 24 hours in Mario Kart is 24 minutes. And so I think it's like 14 minutes is what a day is, but there's also sunrise and sunset, things like that. The thing that is really, really cool though, and you'll notice it the more time you spend in the open world, is that all the NPCs have routines. The trains will pull up at train stations, all the toads and all the different creatures will get off, and they'll walk to their cars and then drive their cars away. It's not as stitched together where, sometimes you'll see like a car pull up and a toad get out. They might wander around a bit, like wander around a shopping bit, like a shopping center for a bit, and go back to a different car and then leave in that. But still, the detail is there in terms of bringing this entire world of Nintendo to life. And if you're a Nintendo fan, a Mario fan, a Mushroom Kingdom fan, whatever, it's just cool to see. And again, I don't feel like that many of us spent that much time in the open world of Mario Kart World, just because of how weirdly, not necessarily undercooked, but half-baked it felt. And so, with all the new updates, chasing down all the P-switches, hoovering up all the medallions, spending a lot more time in the open world, it's just cool to see all the detail that's there. Lastly, a bit of trivia inspired by Baby Steps. I'm yet to play this, but I didn't realize it came from Bennett Foddy. I was staying away from the development of Baby Steps, because I knew I was just going to go into it pretty fresh. If you haven't kept up with it, it's the latest title published by Devolver Digital, and it's a physics-based game. You're playing as a dude in like a baby onesie or whatever, and you're just attempting to get around an open world. Now, I'm yet to play it. I'm hoping to put together, like I said, like a grab bag. I'll do my first impressions with the game if I get time. But Baby Steps itself, like I said, made by Bennett Foddy, who you might know from QWOP. If you played browser-based games back in the 2000s, Bennett Foddy cut his teeth on QWOP, which again was like a physics-based running game where you weren't necessarily meant to get through it. It was more just an excuse to laugh at the physics. That would then be the foundation for what Foddy would then do in Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy way back in like 2017 or 2019, which is a whole game about failure. You're not supposed to be able to get through that game either. I feel like Foddy has made this his thing, where he sort of lampoons the general idea that gamers, we like to get through stuff in terms of we like the challenge. And I feel like these games and this particular creator kind of just laughs at that. It's like if you look at the history of video games and video game difficulty, as far as I ever ascertained, came from the arcades, came from that idea of artificially manufacturing difficulty and cheapness to rob you of another pound or another quarter or whatever in the arcades. That is where video game difficulty came from, because when video games went from the arcades into consoles and then home releases, then, you know, that stuff went away. It was like, okay, the price goes up for the entry fee, and, you know, the whole idea of Nintendo Hard became a thing back in the 80s. And we started getting incredibly hard games on console releases, because it's like, how do you make sure that someone gets, you know, their money's worth if, you know, they're able to beat something straight away? So it's an interesting conundrum if you think about the history of video game difficulty. And it is one of those things that it stands out when someone like Foddy comes along and makes a game that is intentionally hard. And then you look back at the projects that he's had in the works beforehand and realize that he's been making this point forever. We shouldn't care about video game difficulty. We should care about the journey, and we should care about you know, what it means to get through a video game and enjoy those experiences in all those open world spaces, at least in Baby Steps' case, because it's only your own frustrations that are going to get to you, and how much you're investing, you know, in your potential personal pride in being able to hit the credits. If you can let something go, you might just be happier overall. And that has been the Just Good Game News. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you would like the full show, go over to patreon.com/Tilford for early access to the wider Just Good Game show, and shout out down in the comments your overlooked games, whether they be new or old. I will factor them in. This show would not be possible without all of the lovely patrons over on the Patreon itself. Genuinely cannot do any of this without you. And also, one of the new tiers over on Patreon is the Helping Hero. People who just want to give me more money to be able to do this. I massively, beyond words, appreciate you, having that much faith in me to do this every week in terms of the Just Good Game News show and everything else that I'm putting out in between. So a shout out to everybody who is on the Helping Hero tier over on Patreon. That includes Evil Wabbit, Null, James Payne, Nathan Ellis, Ray Montano, Alex Semenchuk, Robert Mainprice, Habit, King Muttley, and VK's Game Time. Some of you have been here since the very beginning. A couple months back, I could not thank you enough. Thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed your various sound effects and the way that I've put this together. I hope that I can keep bulking this stuff out based on how many other people get involved on the different tiers. But once again, thank you so much all for taking part, for watching, and hopefully I'll see you over on the Patreon, over on the Discord. If not, I will see you next week. Goodbye.